The moment my pen touched the paper, a woman I had never met whispered, "Do not sign this, or your sister will not survive the night." Her fingers closed around my wrist with a strength that startled me. Not rude, not dramatic, desperate. I looked up, confused, my heart pounding as the black ink hovered over the signature line. Around us, the ICU hummed with quiet machines and filtered air, the sound of life being measured in beeps and numbers. On the other side of my sister's bed, her husband stood frozen, his expression caught somewhere between shock and irritation. I had been told this would be the hardest decision of my life. I had driven 6 hours to El Paso, believing I was coming to say goodbye. My sister Lillian lay motionless beneath thin white sheets, a breathing tube taped carefully to her mouth. Her chest rose and fell in perfect rhythm, too perfect, like something rehearsed. The nurse earlier had said she was gone in every way that mattered. Massive stroke, no meaningful brain function, no chance of recovery. All that was left was paperwork. Victor, Lillian's husband of 22 years, had placed the documents neatly on the bedside table himself. End-of-life authorization, comfort care transition. He spoke softly when he explained them, his voice steady, practiced, almost soothing. "She would not want to live like this," he said. "You know that." I did know my sister, or at least I thought I did. I knew she hated hospitals. I knew she believed in dignity. I knew she trusted Victor with her life. That was why I had picked up the pen. Until the whisper. "Please," the woman said again, her voice barely audible. "Just give me 10 minutes. That is all I am asking." 10 minutes. I noticed her badge only then. Rosa Martinez, cardiac monitoring technician, night shift. Her eyes were wide, glistening, fixed on mine with something that went beyond concern. Fear. Real fear. Victor cleared his throat sharply. "Is there a problem here?" The room felt smaller all of a sudden, the air heavier. "This is a family matter," Victor continued, his tone tightening. "We are in the middle of something very difficult." Rosa did not let go of my wrist. "Ma'am," she said, choosing her words carefully, "hospital protocol requires I clarify a discrepancy before any documents are signed. It will not take long." Discrepancy. The word echoed in my head. Victor's jaw clenched. He glanced at the papers, then back at me. His eyes lingered on the pen, just for a second too long. I felt something shift inside my chest. A quiet warning. The kind I had learned not to ignore during my years auditing medical claims, when numbers told stories people tried to hide. 10 minutes, Rosa said again. "If I am wrong, you can sign everything after. But if I am right and you sign now, there is no undoing it." I pulled my hand back slowly and set the pen down. Victor stared at me, disbelief flickering across his face. "What are you doing?" I swallowed hard. My heart was racing, but my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. "I am taking 10 minutes. I did not know then that those 10 minutes would expose a crime, unravel a marriage, and change the course of 2 lives forever. All I knew was that a stranger had stopped my hand. And somehow, I trusted her. 4 days earlier, my phone rang just after dawn. It was Victor. His voice sounded strained, but controlled, like someone reading from a script they had rehearsed in their head all night. He said my sister had collapsed in her sleep, that he had found her on the bedroom floor when he went to wake her, that the paramedics arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do except keep her alive on machines. "Massive stroke," he said. "Sudden. No warning signs." The doctors were not hopeful. I remember standing in my kitchen in Santa Teresa, staring at the coffee I had just poured, watching steam rise as he spoke. I remember thinking how odd it was that he never paused to cry, not once. He spoke in complete sentences, clear and efficient, as if he were briefing me on a business deal that had gone bad. He told me which hospital. He told me what time she had arrived. He told me that the neurologist said there was no meaningful brain function. And then, without taking a breath, he said something that did not sit right. Lillian would not want to live like this, Martha. We should prepare ourselves. Prepare ourselves. It felt early for that. Too early. I asked to speak to a doctor. He said one would call me later. I asked if Lillian had said anything before she collapsed. He said no, she had been asleep, peaceful. Then he mentioned the paperwork. Just so you are not caught off guard when you arrive, he said, they may ask you to help with some decisions. You are her sister. Family matters. That was when my stomach tightened. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, replaying the call in my head. I told myself I was overthinking, that grief came in different forms, that Victor was probably in shock. But something felt too clean, too organized. I packed a small bag and drove west, the desert stretching endlessly on both sides of the road. As the miles passed, memories of Lillian kept rising uninvited, her laugh loud and sudden, the way she hummed when she cooked, the text she had sent me just 2 nights before the call. We need to talk when you have time. I am thinking of making some changes. No context, no explanation, just that. When I reached their house in El Paso later that evening, Victor was not there. The place felt staged, like a model home, every surface spotless, no signs of panic, no overturned furniture, no broken glass, just a faint chemical smell lingering in the master bedroom that I could not place. I went to her nightstand instinctively. Her phone was gone. Victor said the police had it. That night at the hospital, he hugged me when I arrived, his arms stiff, his chest barely moving. He led me straight to the ICU, talking the entire time. About doctors, about prognosis, about how strong Lillian had always been. He never asked how I was holding up. And when I stood beside her bed for the first time, watching the machines breathe for her, I noticed something else. Lillian did not look like someone who had been fighting for her life. She looked like someone who had been carefully put to sleep. I told myself it meant nothing. But 4 days later, standing in that ICU with a pen in my hand and a stranger whispering for me to stop, every word from that phone call came rushing back with new weight. Some calls change your life because of what is said. Others change it because of what is said too smoothly. And I was beginning to understand which kind I had received. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended haze, as if time itself had slowed inside the ICU. Doctors came and went, always polite, always calm. They spoke in careful phrases, full of soft certainties and clinical distance. Severe neurological damage, no meaningful response, poor prognosis. But every time I asked to see detailed imaging or EEG reports, I was told they were being reviewed or that the attending physician would explain later. Later never came. What did come, again and again, was Victor. He was always there when the doctors examined Lillian, always standing close to the bed, one hand resting on the rail as if claiming it. He answered questions before anyone else could. He finished sentences that were not his to finish. When one neurologist asked whether Lillian had any prior symptoms, Victor spoke immediately. No headaches, no dizziness, perfectly healthy. I watched the doctor nod and move on, never looking at me. Then there was Naomi. She appeared sometime late on the first night, gliding into the room like she belonged there. Tall, impeccably dressed, her hair always perfectly arranged, even at odd hours. Victor introduced her quickly. "She is here to help us through this," he said. "Patient liaison." I waited for a badge. It never came. Naomi stood too close to Victor. She touched his arm when she spoke, leaned in when she whispered. Once, I caught them exchanging a look that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with coordination. When I asked what agency she worked for, Naomi smiled politely and changed the subject. Little things began to pile up. Victor kept bringing up costs, not loudly, not crudely, just enough to plant the idea. Each day in the ICU was expensive. Insurance would only cover so much. Lillian would not want her savings drained for nothing. The way he said nothing stuck with me. One afternoon, when he thought I was in the restroom, I heard him speaking softly in the hallway. His tone was different. Sharp, pressed, urgent. "We cannot wait much longer," he said. "It needs to be done while the assessment stands." When he noticed me, he smiled too quickly and asked if I needed anything. I started paying closer attention to Lillian herself. The machines told one story, but her body told another. Her skin was warm. Her hands were not rigid. Once, when a nurse suctioned her airway, I could have sworn I saw her brow tighten, just slightly. I mentioned it to Victor. "Reflex," he said dismissively. "The doctors said it means nothing." That night, alone in the visitor lounge, I pulled up Lillian's medical portal on my tablet, or tried to. Her access had been restricted. Only Victor had full authorization. I told myself again that I was imagining patterns where there were none, that grief was making me suspicious, that hospitals were chaotic places and not everything happened on my schedule. But I had spent decades auditing records that looked perfectly legitimate on the surface and rotten underneath. And one thought kept returning, quiet but relentless. If my sister were truly gone, why did everyone seem so afraid of time? Why the urgency? Why the pressure? Why the constant presence? Why the woman who would not identify herself? By the morning of the third day, I had stopped asking myself whether something was wrong. I was asking myself how deep it went, and I was starting to understand that the answers were not going to be given freely. They were going to have to be uncovered. Rosa did not take me to an office. She led me through a narrow side corridor I had not noticed before, past a locked supply room and into a small space filled with monitors and humming equipment. The lights were dimmed, the glow of screens casting shadows across her face. Only then did she let go of my wrist. Her hands were shaking. "I am not supposed to do this," she said quietly. "If they find out I pulled you aside, I could lose my job." But I could not sleep knowing what I saw. I sat down slowly, my legs suddenly weak. Saw what? Rosa took a breath, steadying herself. "I work nights, cardiac and neurological monitoring. I have been assigned to your sister's signals since she came in." She turned one of the monitors toward me. Lines pulsed across the screen, patterns I recognized just enough to know they were not flat. "They told you she has no meaningful brain activity," Rosa continued. "That is not true." My heart skipped. "What do you mean, not true?" "I mean there are responses," she said. "Small, inconsistent, but real. When sedation is reduced even slightly, her brain reacts. Her heart rate changes. Her facial muscles respond. That should not happen if she is truly brain dead." I stared at the screen, then back at Rosa. "The doctors said—" "The doctors see what is in the chart," she interrupted gently. "And the chart is not clean." She pulled out her phone and opened a folder. Inside were screenshots of medication logs, timestamps circled in red. Every time Victor visits alone, the sedative levels go up within the hour. Not enough to kill her, just enough to keep her unresponsive. Enough to make her look worse during assessments. My chest tightened. "Are you saying he is ordering it?" "No," Rosa said. "He is not allowed to. But someone with access is. The orders appear, then disappear. Adjusted electronically. Backdated. Cleaned up." I thought of Naomi. Of the way she hovered. Of Victor always being present during exams. I reported it once, Rosa said, her voice lowering. The first night I noticed, I was told not to speculate, that the attending physician approved everything. She hesitated, then added, the attending physician and Victor know each other. They sit together in the cafeteria. They talk like old friends. The room felt suddenly too small. There was something else, Rosa said. 2 nights ago, I came in early, around 1:30 in the morning. I saw Victor and that woman in your sister's room. Naomi. Rosa nodded. The door was closed. That is not allowed. When I entered, the IV pump had been changed. The medication bag did not match my previous setup. I asked about it. Victor said the doctor adjusted the plan. Naomi stood in front of the door like she was blocking me. Rosa swallowed. After they left, I checked the bag. The concentration was wrong. She showed me a photo, a clear image of the IV label, another of Victor leaning over the pump, another of Naomi standing watch. I copied everything, Rosa said. I did not know what else to do. I was scared they would erase it. I felt cold all over. Why tell me? I asked. Why not go to the police? Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Because without your signature, they cannot move forward. Without it, she is still protected. But once you sign, everything they are doing becomes legal. The words hit me with terrifying clarity. They are waiting for me. Rosa nodded. They need the papers. They need it to look like mercy. I leaned back, my mind racing. If what Rosa was saying was true, my sister was not dying. She was being kept from waking up. And someone was counting on my grief to finish the job. How much time do we have? I asked. Rosa glanced at the clock on the wall. Maybe minutes. Maybe less. Then we cannot waste them, I said, standing up. Rosa looked at me, startled. What are you going to do? I met her gaze, feeling something harden inside me. I am going to make them believe they are about to win. And while they are watching the pen, we are going to expose the truth they thought no one would see. While Rosa moved with quiet urgency back toward the monitoring station, I stayed seated for a moment, forcing myself to breathe. Panic would ruin everything. Grief would blur my judgment. I needed clarity, not emotion. So I did what I had always done when something did not add up. I followed the money. Victor had always lived well. Not flashy, but comfortable in that deliberate way that suggested control. The house in El Paso sat on a hill with a view of the city lights. The cars were new but practical. The vacations carefully planned and photographed. To anyone on the outside, he looked successful. But success leaves traces. And so does desperation. While Victor and Naomi waited outside my sister's room, assuming I was still being delayed by hospital formalities, I opened my laptop in the visitor lounge and logged into the systems I still had access to. Retirement had taken me out of the workforce, but it had not erased 40 years of knowing where to look. Public records were enough. Property filings showed Victor had recently refinanced 2 commercial buildings. Both projects were behind schedule. Both had liens attached. One was already in default. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Then I checked insurance. Lillian had always been cautious with money. Conservative. She once joked that insurance was for people who planned to live long enough to regret not having it. 5 years ago, she had taken out a life insurance policy. I remembered that much. What I did not remember was the update. 6 months earlier, the policy had been amended. The value increased to $4.2 million. The sole beneficiary listed was Victor. No contingencies. No secondary names. No sister. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. 6 months. That was around the same time Lillian had mentioned feeling uneasy. The same time she had asked me about estate planning during one of our calls. The same time she had said she wanted to support causes that mattered to her, quietly, without Victor making it public. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. It was never about mercy. It was about timing. I thought about the way Victor spoke of costs, of not draining her estate, of dignity. I thought about Naomi's confidence, her familiarity with legal language, the way she watched everything like a chessboard. Naomi was not a patient liaison. She was strategy. As if summoned by the thought, I heard their voices drifting down the hallway, soft at first, then sharper as they approached. "This has gone on long enough," Victor said. "She should have signed by now." Naomi answered in a low voice. "Stay calm. Pressure makes mistakes. We just need her cooperation." Cooperation, not consent. I pressed myself further into the chair, listening. "Once the papers are signed," Naomi continued, "the rest is automatic. No one questions comfort care. It is designed to end quietly." Victor exhaled. "And then we are free." The word echoed in my mind. Free from debt. Free from consequences. Free from my sister. They stopped just outside the lounge. I could see their shadows through the glass. I understood then that this was not a sudden crime born of panic. It was a slow one, calculated, planned around legal language and hospital policy, designed to look compassionate while stripping away the one thing my sister still had: time. I stood as they entered, forcing my face into something neutral, something tired. "I am sorry for the delay," I said softly. "I just needed a moment." Victor's shoulders relaxed instantly. Naomi smiled with professional warmth. "Of course," Naomi said. "These decisions are heavy." "Yes," I agreed, "especially when there is so much at stake." Victor did not catch the edge beneath my words. He gestured back toward the ICU. "Are you ready now?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a grieving husband, but a man watching a clock. "Almost," I said. "Just one last thing I need to understand before I sign." As we walked back toward my sister's room, I knew one truth with terrifying certainty. They believed the hardest part was already over. They had no idea the most dangerous part was just beginning. I told Victor I was ready. Not fully, not confidently, just ready enough to make him believe the waiting was over. We walked back toward Lillian's room together, Naomi slightly behind us, her heels silent against the polished floor. I noticed how Victor's pace quickened as we approached the ICU doors, how his shoulders loosened as if a weight were finally lifting. The papers were exactly where he had left them. The pen, too. I sat down in the chair beside my sister's bed and picked up the first page, letting my eyes move slowly over words I already understood far too well. Comfort care, withdrawal of support, no extraordinary measures. Victor leaned forward. "We really should not delay much longer." I nodded. "I know. I just need to clarify something before I sign. For my own peace of mind." Naomi stepped closer. "What do you need clarified?" I looked at the chart attached to the foot of the bed, the medication list, the timestamps, the neatness of it all. "I would like to understand the exact timeline of her neurological assessments," I said, "especially the ones conducted while sedation was increased." Victor stiffened. "The doctors handled that." "I am aware," I replied calmly, "but as her sister, I am entitled to understand how those conclusions were reached." Naomi smiled, but her eyes hardened. "This is not the time for an audit." That was when Rosa's voice crackled faintly over the intercom at the nurse's station across the hall. "Code consult in ICU 3. Victor's head snapped toward the sound. "What is that?" "Probably nothing," Naomi said quickly. "A routine consult." But I was already standing. "Excuse me," I said, setting the papers down again. "I need a glass of water." Victor opened his mouth to object, then closed it. Too many eyes in the hallway. Too much attention. I stepped out just far enough to see Rosa at the station, her hands moving fast, her face pale but focused. A man I did not recognize stood beside her, older, gray-haired, his expression thunderous as he scrolled through data on a tablet. "Dr. Nguyen," Rosa whispered when she saw me, "chief neurologist, not connected to the attending." He looked up at me. "Are you the sister?" "Yes." He did not soften his tone. "Your sister is not brain dead." The words landed like a jolt of electricity. "Her sedation levels are dangerously high and medically unjustified," he continued. "Her EEG shows preserved function that should have prompted further evaluation days ago. Someone altered her treatment plan." Behind me, I heard Victor's voice rise. "What is going on here?" "Security," Rosa said, her voice steadier now. "We need security." Victor stepped into the hallway, his face flushed. "This is outrageous. You cannot interfere like this." Dr. Nguyen turned toward him slowly. "Mr. Hale, you are no longer authorized to be present during evaluations." Naomi reached for Victor's arm. "We should leave." Too late. Two uniformed security officers appeared at the far end of the corridor, followed closely by hospital administration. One of them held a tablet. "We have footage," the administrator said, "from the past 72 hours and from the residents." Victor froze. "Footage?" The administrator turned the screen toward me first. I saw Victor in my sister's room late at night, adjusting the infusion pump. Naomi standing by the door, watching the hallway. Another clip showed Victor entering the house days earlier, carrying a small insulated case. Another showed him leaving the bedroom 20 minutes before the emergency call. My knees weakened, but I stayed upright. "This is a misunderstanding," Victor said, his voice cracking. "I was following instructions." The administrator shook his head. The instructions were fabricated. Dr. Nguyen looked at me. "If you had signed those papers, she would have been disconnected within the hour." I thought of the pen, the whisper, the 10 minutes. Behind us, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder. I walked back into Lillian's room and picked up the pen once more. Victor followed me, his face now tight with panic. "Please," he said quietly, "do not do this." I looked at him across my sister's bed. "I am not," I said. And then I turned toward the door as it opened, revealing 2 police officers stepping inside. I am letting the truth do it instead. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear replace calculation in Victor's eyes. The kind of fear that comes when time finally runs out. The room went silent the moment the officer stepped inside. The steady rhythm of the monitors suddenly sounded too loud, each beep slicing through the tension like a countdown. Victor stood at the foot of the bed, his mouth opening and closing as if words were trapped somewhere behind his teeth. Naomi had taken a step back, her composure cracking just enough to reveal panic beneath the polish. One of the officers spoke first. "Victor Hale, we need you to step away from the patient." "This is a mistake," Victor said quickly. "I am her husband. I have every right to be here." "Not anymore," the officer replied. I picked up the pen one last time, feeling its weight between my fingers. Victor's eyes locked onto it, desperation flooding his face. "Martha, please," he said, lowering his voice. "You are emotional. This is not who you are. Lillian would not want chaos." That was when I looked at him and asked the question that had been forming in my chest since Rosa first pulled me aside. "When did you decide my sister was worth more dead than alive?" The words hung in the air. Naomi inhaled sharply. Victor stared at me, stunned, as if I had struck him. "What kind of question is that?" he snapped. "You are grieving." "Am I?" I said quietly. "Or am I finally seeing clearly?" I stepped closer to the bed, placing my hand over Lillian's warm fingers. She twitched slightly beneath my touch, a movement so small only someone watching closely would notice. Victor noticed. His face drained of color. "That is impossible," he whispered. Dr. Nguyen moved forward. "It is not. Her sedation is already being reduced. She has been responding for some time." Victor took a step back, bumping into Naomi. "You said this would be finished today," Naomi hissed under her breath. "You said the paperwork would end it." One of the officers raised his eyebrows. Paperwork? To end what exactly? Naomi's mouth snapped shut. That was all it took. The second officer stepped forward, hand resting on his cuffs. "Victor Hale, you are being detained for questioning in connection with the attempted harm of your wife." "Attempted harm?" Victor shouted. "That is absurd. I did nothing wrong. Everything I did was approved." "By whom?" Dr. Nguyen asked. "The physician who falsified records and accepted payments from your shell company?" Victor's legs seemed to give out beneath him. He reached for the bed rail, then pulled his hand back as if burned. Naomi tried to slip past the officers toward the door. "Stop," one of them ordered. She ran. She made it 3 steps before security blocked her path and forced her to the ground. Her scream echoed down the hallway, sharp and raw, nothing like the calm voice she had used all week. Victor watched it all, frozen. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he finally looked at Lillian again, really looked at her, at the woman he had calculated away. "You were supposed to be asleep," he murmured. I leaned in close, my voice low enough that only he could hear. "She was, just not dying." The officers led him toward the door, his protests dissolving into incoherent muttering. Naomi followed, sobbing now, mascara streaking down her face. When the door closed behind them, the room felt different, lighter, as if something toxic had finally been removed. Dr. Nguyen turned to me. "We are transferring your sister to a secure unit. Her treatment plan is being reset immediately." I nodded, unable to speak. As they prepared to move Lillian, her eyelids fluttered faintly, just enough to remind me that the question I had asked had not only broken a man, it had saved a life. 3 days later, I was sitting beside Lillian's bed in a different ICU, one guarded by codes and locked doors, where Victor's name was nowhere near the chart. The machines sounded different here, calmer, less frantic. Her breathing was her own now, uneven but real. The heavy fog of sedation had been lifted carefully, layer by layer, like someone drawing back curtains after a long night. I was holding her hand, tracing the faint freckles on her skin. When it happened, her fingers moved. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the same desperate hope that had tried to fool me before. But then her eyelids fluttered. Once, twice, and slowly, impossibly, they opened. Lillian looked at me, confusion clouding her gaze. "Martha," she whispered, her voice rough, barely there. "Why does everything feel so heavy?" I broke. I laughed and cried at the same time, pressing her hand to my cheek. "You scared me," I said. "You scared me so bad." Over the next hours, then days, the truth came out in full. Victor had been drowning in debt after a failed development project. Naomi had been his escape plan and his accomplice, feeding him legal language and timing everything around hospital policy. The doctor who signed off on the altered records confessed when confronted with the data Rosa had preserved. Money had changed hands. Ethics had disappeared. But Lillian survived. She would need months of rehabilitation. She would walk with a slight limp. Some memories would come back slowly, others never fully. But she was alive, and that was everything. The case moved quickly once the evidence was undeniable. Victor was charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. Naomi faced the same. The physician lost his license and awaited trial. Lillian did not ask about Victor at first. When she finally did, it was only one sentence. "I trusted him," she said quietly. I squeezed her hand. "And that was not your fault." Weeks later, when she was strong enough to leave the hospital, we stepped outside into the El Paso sun together. She closed her eyes and let the warmth hit her face, breathing in like someone tasting air for the first time. "I am still here," she said, and I almost was not. That night, sitting together in silence, I realized something that stayed with me. Evil does not always come screaming or violent. Sometimes it comes with paperwork, patience, and a pen placed gently in your hand. If Rosa had stayed quiet, if I had ignored that whisper, if I had signed because everyone told me to hurry, this story would have ended very differently. Instead, it became a reminder. 5 lessons this experience carved into my bones. 1. Trust your instincts even when authority pressures you not to. 2. Never rush a decision that cannot be undone. 3. Urgency is often the mask of manipulation. 4. One brave voice can stop a tragedy. 5. And a life is priceless when someone is willing to fight for it. If this story moved you, take a moment to like and share it. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who may need them most. And tell me in the comments, what lesson did you take from this story, and which city are you watching from? Sometimes, the smallest pause can save a life.